Hey guys, welcome to the Steel City Roundtable. I am your host, Mark Kneebone. Thanks for joining us again. For those of you who it is the first time, if you're looking for political talk or religious talk, this is the wrong channel because we talk about all the good stuff and some bad stuff, but basically how we can make our lives better. So as you can see in that image that I had up in the beginning, yesterday, the 10th, was Mental Health Awareness Day. So for those of you who suffer from mental health, I hope you are doing well. For those of you who know someone or may know someone who's suffering from mental health, reach out, check on them, make sure they're okay. Even though they tell you they're good, they may need your help. But today, what I want to talk about is mental health, seeing it's fitting. Today is the 11th. It is currently 2:15 in the morning. So I woke up and decided I was going to shoot a podcast. So let's talk about mental health. For those of you who've never seen this show before, my background is I'm a former law enforcement officer. I suffer from depression and PTSD, and I'm also a recovering alcoholic. By the grace of God and all the people in my life, I've been sober for 17 months, and life continues to get better. But it wasn't always like that. Back in May of last year, I was rock bottom and I was suffering. Alcoholism, it's all different for everybody, but my story was just I could not live without alcohol. So I drank every chance I got, and I got to the point where my life was more worthwhile to be over than it was to be alive. So I suffer what everybody else suffered from. I had those thoughts. The thoughts of ending it, the thoughts that I wasn't worth anything, the thoughts that nobody loved or cared about me. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have those thoughts, so you can relate to me. But back in May, I got sober, went away to treatment, and up until that point, I knew I had anxiety, but, that's the only thing I thought I had. I thought I drank a little bit too much. I thought I had some anxiety. I thought it was stress related. So I didn't really put too much thought into my mental health. I spent most of my life ignoring my mental health, pretty much making decisions in any way, shape, or form that were completely against the idea of having a good mental health. So when I hit that point where I decided to get help, I went down to Florida to a great rehabilitation center down there and began my journey from a 24/7 drunk to a person that could contribute to society again, and someone who could think about others rather than themselves all the time. But that journey was not easy, and those of you who are suffering, it's not easy. I went there, and my whole thought process was that I'm just taking a break. I'm getting away for a little bit. I'm getting away from all the things that are causing stress in my life, all the people that are doing me wrong, all the decisions that other people are making that are negatively affecting me. And at no point in that equation did I ever think that A plus B equaled Mark. I was the problem, and that's a really hard thing for us to admit to ourselves and to admit to other people, is that we are where we are because of the decisions we've made, not the decisions and the actions of others. We hold on to this idea that we have control of what's going on around us. So, that being said, being in rehab in a completely unfamiliar environment, my anxiety was through the roof. I was completely uncomfortable. I wanted to leave. I'll be honest with anybody who asked me, I wanted to leave. I did not really think I was going to get sober, because there were so many things going on in my head that I couldn't think straight anymore. Logical thinking was out the window. The only way I thought was emotionally, and usually that was under the influence of alcohol. They have this thing called cognitive behavioral therapy. Learned about it in rehab. And just briefly, for those of you who don't know about it, it is basically the idea that we learn habits throughout our lives, and we attach emotions to stimuli, and we basically reprogram our brains to act a certain way when a certain stimuli pops up. So for me, it was I got angry, I got upset, I got stressed, so I drank. I got in a fight with my girlfriend over the phone, so I got depressed. I got angry, so I drank. I had a good day, shot a 76 on the golf course. I went and drank. So my process had led me down the road where every little thing that I did had an emotional attachment, and that emotional attachment led me to drinking. So, I didn't realize that I was doing that. I was just going about my day like this is the way I live. So, in treatment, they do a lot of therapy, especially the place that I went. A lot of like really in deep, introspective therapy. And it's not the kind of therapy you think it is. It's not like what's bothering you today, what's bothering yesterday, why are you upset today? It was more, why are you here? What led you to this point? And when I was asked those questions, I couldn't answer them because my answers were bullshit. I was playing the system initially. I was just like, I drink too much, or, I go on these benders, or, I mistreated this person, or I told a lie to this person. It was all superfluous bullshit. And, initially I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. I just drink too much. And that myth was unraveled very, very quickly. My personal therapist at treatment had me in a room with probably 20 other people that I'd met a couple times at treatment. And it was a family dynamics course. Well, I should say course, but a lecture, interactive lecture. And he looked at me, and I was there maybe like 4 or 5 days. And he looked at me and he goes, so Mark, tell me about your family. And I gave him the cookie cutter story, my mom was emotionally abusive. My stepdad was great. My dad didn't really hang around, blah, 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 blah. And he looks at me and goes, bullshit. And for me, that pissed me off so much. To have someone sit there and tell me what I was saying was bullshit. So immediately I shut down and got defensive. Well, this therapist is like a ravenous pit bull. He just kept coming at me, and he kept saying, well, tell me about your mother. Okay, she was emotionally abusive and she cheated on my dad and this and that. And then he's like, no, tell me about your mother. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're asking me to tell you. And what he wanted from me was not what my mother did, but who she actually was as a person in my world. And I started to open up. And this was the first time that I really opened up about my family. I don't talk about it very much. I mean, most of this shit I didn't talk about until May of last year. But yeah, I was like, she abandoned me as a child. She did this, she did that. She's bipolar. She's always out for herself. And then it gets deeper. He's like, how does it affect you? How does it make you feel? And I start talking more and more in depth about who my mother is and how I felt like she didn't give a shit about me. And, she didn't care about my sister. She cheated on my dad, so she's a piece of shit. And, I really started to dig in. And when I started to open those wounds, it just kept coming. And, it ended up leading me into a discussion about me being in Brooklyn during 9/11 and watching the towers fall from Brooklyn from 6 miles outside Ground Zero and being surrounded by people that had family and friends in the towers. And there was nothing I could do. And by the time I was done, I was in a heap, just crying in the middle of the room. And he finally stopped because he'd seen he'd broken me. He'd seen he'd gotten what he wanted from me. He got true emotion. He got true feelings. And he got a partial understanding of who I am as a person. And he suggested I do some therapies there. One's called EMDR, one's called neuro. And in neuro, they take a scan of your brain and they find out where the information is going across the brainwaves. There's a center for happiness, there's a center for sexuality, there's a center for complex thinking, problem solving, there's a center for depression, PTSD. And I got my initial scan done. And when I got that scan back, he looked at me and said, you're fucked up. I mean, honestly, that was the conversation. He's like, you're fucked up, man. And I'm like, well, what's it say? And he's like, every single brainwave in your, every piece of information that you take in is going to PTSD, depression, anxiety, self-harm and things of that nature. Granted, I never hurt myself, but it was basically that I had a traffic jam in my brain. And every piece of information, everything I was taking in, was all trying to go to the same place, and it couldn't get anywhere, which increased my feelings of loneliness, isolation, depression, anti-socialism. And, I saw that and I was like, you mean there is actually something physically wrong with me? And they're like, yeah, you have depression and you have PTSD, and we're going to do some tests to confirm that. But, you know, I was like, holy shit. Like, why do I have PTSD? I mean, I was a cop for 12 years, but I don't see it. I saw 9/11 from, 6 miles outside of Ground Zero. 3 of my friends were killed. My father died like 10 years ago, and he was out of my life for like 15 years, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have PTSD, right? And he explained to me that PTSD is not selective. PTSD is not something that has a niche. You know, in layman's terms for me, because I'm a big dummy, he told me that anything in your life that you've held on to longer than 10 minutes and it's negative is probably some form of trauma. And I thought about it for a minute. I'm like, so, like a bad breakup could be trauma, could be like PTSD trauma. And he's like, any trauma that is not resolved or processed has the potential to be PTSD. It has a potential to lead to feelings and end up being PTSD. Because basically, like I said, layman's terms, PTSD is unprocessed trauma. It is something that you hold on to that hurt you emotionally, mentally, physical, whatever it is, and you just have never been able to deal with it and move on from it. And I'm sitting there like, holy shit. Blueberry coffee, by the way. I'm like, holy shit, like there's something wrong with me. It's not that I just want to drink all the time. There's actually something wrong with me. And I mean, that moment, it turned everything around for me. Because now, granted, I didn't change in that moment, right? The change has been ongoing. But what I did realize is that I drank for a reason. And I'm a strong believer that every alcoholic and addict suffers from some type of mental illness to whatever degree. But not every person that has a mental health issue suffers from addiction and alcoholism. Alcoholism and addiction are the byproduct. They are a symptom of something much deeper. And, I didn't understand that until I went to treatment. And understanding that, my brain was basically riding in the back seat while my body was making the decisions, because I had trained my body to respond to things a certain way, as in depression, anxiety, being upset, being mad. And then I had taught my body that it's going to tell the brain, in order for you to feel okay, now you have to drink. So it was crazy. Like, it was something so simple. Like, I wish I would have known about years ago. But it was something so simple that I suffer from mental health. And it's not a bad thing. Mental health is not something to be ashamed of or to hide or be scared of. If you can get diagnosed with mental health, I'm not saying jump up and down and, go to the casino, but if you're diagnosed with mental health, then you can form a plan of attack in order to deal with that mental health. And maybe you don't have to go down the path that I went down, where I wasted 34 years of my life drinking myself stupid, taking way too many risks with my life, way too many risks with my decisions and my relationships. Being diagnosed with mental health is a revelation for me. It was probably the most impactful thing that's ever happened to me. And that's saying a lot, because I've seen some shit. But I say that because, moving forward at that point, now I knew something was on paper wrong with me. And there was something that was documented and diagnosed, and it wasn't some bullshit. It was real. And now that I knew it was real, I had to sit down and say, okay, fuckstick, what are you going to do about it? Like, what do you do now? And that led into a whole nother world of emotions and anxiety and depression, because now, I can't hide behind the excuse that, oh, so and so did this, or that's not my fault, so and so did this. I had to start looking into myself and start taking responsibility for my actions. And, addicts, alcoholics, we're great at blaming everyone else. We're narcissists to an extent. We don't admit when we're wrong. When we're wrong, it's because somebody else did something that caused it, right? So, my relationship ended because my girlfriend wasn't right for me. No, my relationship ended because I was incapable of being emotionally open and accepting to anybody because I had this block in my brain that was stopping me from being the person that I am now and the person that I want to continue to be, caring, loving, and unselfish. You know, um, so now you have a whole nother challenge in front of you. Now you have to figure out how you're going to deal with this and how you're going to work through it. And I'll tell you what, folks, I used to think therapy was crap. I've been in therapy my entire life. I've never gotten shit out of it. Uh, but, since I've been home, 17 months sober, therapy every week, opening up to my friends, talking about my shit, talking to my coworkers, like doing this podcast, like this is not who I wanted to be. This is where the world led me. This is where I ended up because this is where I'm supposed to be, right? So, you know, I was at treatment for 37 days at this facility. And in that 37 days, I did neuro 4 or 5 days a week. They also gave me another treatment called EMDR/ART. And these are both therapies that help you deal with unresolved traumas. I'm not even going to try to explain them, but do the research. EMDR. The other one is ART. And check them out. I think in Pennsylvania, most insurance companies cover that. The neuro is a different story. That is not covered in Pennsylvania as of yet, but hopefully it will be soon because this shit's amazing. It literally saved my life. But I continued to do neuro, and you do neuro for 4 or 5 days, and every week they would do another scan to check where your brain activity was. And throughout the course of the 37 days I was there, so I think I did it like 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I did it for 5 weeks. I went from being completely jammed. So if you think about like a traffic light, red, yellow, green, like most of my shit was in yellow. Some was in red, and very little was in green. Green is good. That's normal. Red and yellow, not so bueno. And when I got done, when I was checking out, they gave me my final scans and gave me my final consultation. And I was like, well, how am I doing, doc? Like, what's up? And they're like, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel great. Like, I don't want to leave this place because I love it here, which is crazy, but I loved everybody there and I felt safe there. He's like, you're pretty much in the green across the board. Think about that. Someone who was thinking about killing themselves, drinking as much as they could, as often as they could, jeopardizing relationships, safety, jobs, whatever for alcohol, comes in completely messed up in the head. 5 weeks later, functioning like a quote unquote average human being, like not living in stress and emotion and fight or flight all day long, but like being able to get up in the morning and go, oh, what am I going to do today? Not like, what the fuck did I do last night? Holy shit, I can't remember a fucking thing. So I got that information and I was like, that's ridiculous, right? Like that's something that's so amazing. Now, I'm not saying this is a cure-all, but this neurotherapy, it basically took a gelatinous mess of a brain and was able to recompartmentalize and redirect traffic so that I could think logically again and not just think emotionally. And I mean, it was amazing because, like I said, 17 months later, I haven't had a drink. And I don't think I've thought of really drinking except one time. And that was when my friend Kenny died, 6/1 of this year. Love you, brother. He's one of the reasons why we do this show. But even then, like, I'll be honest with you, I went to a liquor store and I stood in front of the window. Like it was a gas station here in Pennsylvania that sells alcohol. And I'm just standing in front of the cooler that has all the booze in it. And I'm staring at it and staring at it and staring at it. not really wanting to drink, but like I had that initial reaction, like maybe if I drink, I won't feel this way. Maybe if I drink, I won't hurt. Um, I don't know if they tell you, but when you get sober, you feel shit, and you feel shit a lot. Um, like a shirt I have that says "sober, son of a bitch, everything's real." That's no doubt. Like you feel everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. It doesn't matter. You feel it. So I'm having those feelings because one of my best friends of 20 years just got killed on his motorcycle, and I stood there for like 10 minutes, and then I just said to myself, like, Kenny would hate you if you drank because he'd been there with me through the whole process of getting sober. He was one of my best supporters, biggest supporters. And I was like, Kenny would hate you. He'd be so disappointed in you if you threw it all away, all the work you put in to stay sober and to get healthy. And I walked out, got back in the vehicle and left. And that was it, but the fact that they were able to give me a treatment and help me refocus not only my goals, but my feelings about myself and my feelings about the world and the way I think. Um, it was amazing. So now the test was, can I keep doing it? And, I do therapy every week, or try to do it, yeah, pretty much every week, sometimes twice. Um, I do what I have to do. I don't hold things in anymore. Um, but back to the EMDR and the ART, they basically approach it as if you're in the middle of a tunnel and here's like debilitating trauma and here's a world where you can live free, healthy, and happy, but you're stuck in the middle. You can't get from A to B. So what they do is they have a process where they work you through that trauma to try to give you some type of relief. Um, and I did that in treatment as well. And I did a couple different incidents. One was a really bad breakup I had when I was like 30. And the other was 9/11. And, this kind of treatment, you don't feel great when you're done. At least I didn't. I was exhausted. I was emotional. I was tired. Um, but now I'm not going to say that I think differently about the day, but I can understand the day and I can understand what I was able to do, what I wasn't able to do. And some of that survivor's guilt for being there and not being able to do anything has gone away. And now I can talk about it. So, neuro, EMDR, ART, great things. Check them out. See if you can get involved in that. A lot of therapists offer it in Pittsburgh. Um, but, then the day comes where I leave treatment and I got to come home. I got to fly back to Pittsburgh. And I was more nervous going home than I was going to Florida. Granted, I was drunk all day. I mean, I was reading the big book on the plane while I was drinking Jack Daniels and Coke. So, I was prepping. I was doing some studying. But I got home and full of anxiety, heart racing. My heart rate was probably like 150, and one of my best friends picks me up at the airport. And the first thing he says is, dude, you look amazing. Meanwhile, I gained like 10 pounds and I hadn't really worked out much. And, I looked like shit. But he's like, you look healthy. He's like, what happened out there? And I'm like, man, they introduced me to Mark Nebo. They showed me who I was. And no bullshit, that's exactly what happened. They showed me who I was as a person again and who I could be if I managed my mental health. And 17 months later, I still have my ups and downs. I still have my rough days, my bad days. But my worst day now is so much better than my best day when I was drinking. And like I said, I have to thank God and I have to thank the people at the treatment center and I have to thank my friends and family because they've kept me on path. So that's background on me and my mental health. So let's get into a couple things. How do we deal with our mental health when we're going through the hustle and the bustle of trying to make a paycheck, taking care of family, taking care of a significant other, taking care of a house, taking care of a car? Of course, everything I'm going to say is based off of my recovery. It has no input into what you do. That's your decision. I'm just telling you what I did. So therapy, number one, got to go to therapy. If you're diagnosed with mental health, you have to address it because if you don't, it could lead you down that path that you may not come back from. And I mean, not come back from. So, therapy's number one. My girlfriend, she's an amazing human being, and she is so easy to talk to. So when I'm having a bad day, I can talk to her. I don't have to look for a friend. I can just come, call her on the phone, go get dinner and talk to her, and she listens. Um, Physical fitness, eating better. All these things have an effect on your mental health. You know, if you eat like shit and you never exercise, well, guess what? A lot more cortisol in your body. You're not getting that endorphin release of the exercise. You're not getting the adrenaline release. Your blood pressure is probably going to be higher because you're not getting enough blood to your muscles. You're not pushing that shit through your system. So, going to the gym, going for walks, eating better. You don't have to eat like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but just eat better. Don't eat fried food all day long. Don't eat donuts 6 times a day. Don't be a dumbass. Um, like those are big things for me. On top of that, when I was in treatment, I learned a couple different things to do for stress relief. One of them is meditation, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm the kind of guy that thought all that stuff was stupid, like some foo-foo bullshit that wasn't going to work. And I meditate any chance I get, especially on days where I'm having a rough day. Breathing techniques, learning how to breathe better, learning how to get more oxygen into your muscles, into your brain. There's a bunch of different breathing methods. There's books everywhere. Check them out. Box breathing. I'll give you a quick one. Box breathing. Real easy. Breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold it for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold it for 4 seconds. Breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold it for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold it for 4 seconds. So it's in, hold, in, hold, out, hold. And you do that, and no bullshit, my heart rate drops significantly when I do that. And I can do that in a truck when I'm at work. It doesn't take long, a couple minutes, just to recenter myself. So those are big things that I do, plus play with my dogs. You know, so many of us, I actually took notes for this, see? Try to be prepared. So a lot of us ignore the signs that we have mental health issues. We just don't pay attention to them. Coffee at 2:30 in the morning, babe. My girlfriend's sleeping right now, so what are you gonna do? My symptoms were isolation, being antisocial, uh, you know, character changes. Like instead of being an open, outgoing person, I was quiet and I was reserved and I was angry a lot. A lot of us turn to drugs and alcohol because that silences the demons that we're dealing with. You know, um, those things are so unhealthy for us to do. And you're all smart people. You know this. Um, but if you're doing these things, and I hope your friends are paying attention, and your family members and your coworkers that know you, I hope they're paying attention. You know, if you see someone that is doing these things that are so far outside their character, with the exception of drinking and, doing drugs, that's a completely different animal. But someone who's usually outgoing and fun to be around starts like blowing you off, doesn't want to return phone calls, doesn't return texts, one word answers, keeps blowing you off, misses work or, any of that shit. Like that's a big sign that something is going on. And like I said, you're smart people. So, if you see that stuff, there's really only one thing you can do. And that's let your friend, family member, coworker, whoever it is, let them know that you care about them and that you're there for them no matter what. You know, you can't force anybody to go get their mental health checked. You can't force anybody to go to rehab. Nobody does anything until they're ready to do it. So, forcing someone, like, I'm not a big fan of interventions. I'm just not. Being surrounded by 10 of the people in your life that you love the most telling you that you're drunk, it's not, I think that's bullshit. I think the better way to handle it is to let them know that you're there for them. And if they're struggling, you're there and you can help and you'll do anything for them. And I think that for me was something that I ignored, even though I knew it was there. So it's not easy, it's not easy getting the point across to someone that you're there for them no matter what. But the more and more you say it, the more and more you show them with your actions of like texting them, hey, how are you doing today? Hey, let's grab lunch. What are you doing this weekend? Oh man, I just called to see how you're doing. The little things matter. They matter more than you'll know if you're not suffering from mental health or an addiction. The little shit is what keeps us from doing really, really bad shit. Um, so as a friend, family member, coworker, just let them know you're there. Don't be ashamed to give a hug and say, man, I love you. You know, uh, that's what got me through, when I came back. Um, you know, what happens to us if we ignore these symptoms? And well, I know what happened to me. I almost killed myself. I was right there. And, you know, I'm not saying that knowing I had mental health would have changed everything then, uh, but I had to be on the cusp of losing everything in order for me to realize that I had to change something. And, that's a very hard decision, because nobody wants to admit that they can't fix something, especially a type A male. I can fix anything, I can do anything. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. And, you know, to admit that you can't fix a problem is very hard to accept on an internal level. But we're not alone. And we forget that too. There's always someone in our life that is there for us if we just ask for the help. Um, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you guys. I mean, life is great. It's not easy. It's not something that, I don't have to work at every day. And, there's a lot of people out there that are suffering quietly by themselves. And it doesn't need to be that way. It doesn't have to be a battle that we fight alone. And it's hard for other people to get that message across that you're not alone and that there are people who care about you. And I'm talking to all you folks out there, whoever watches it that's suffering from addiction or drinks too much or can't explain why they have these negative thoughts and why they always turn to negative town when something happens. I'm talking directly to you. You're not alone. There's fucking people out there that care about you. Stop being so goddamn stubborn. Reach out to someone. Just talk. Because when you get that shit off your chest, when you get that out, you can deal with it. When you hold on to it, you can't. Because you're not dealing with it by stuffing it way down deep. I use the analogy of a dumpster. I used to stuff shit. All the negative things that happened to me in my life, I stuffed them in this dumpster. And it was getting full for the last how many years. And in May of last year, it was full. And it overflowed onto the ground. And now I had to figure out how to clean up all the shit that I'd caused and all the things that I did wrong and all the things that I wish I could have done again. So, taking care of your mental health is so important, because if you have good mental health and you can process things in a healthy way, you can address the problems, the traumas, the difficulties in your life with a reasonable brain and a logical mind instead of an emotional hot mess brain. Life is going to be so much better. And, I started this thing because I felt that being given a second chance, I needed to do something for others because I'd taken my entire life. And Kelly feels the same way. God love her, she'll be back soon. But, this is the hardest thing I've ever have had to do outside of treatment. Getting in front of a camera phone, iPhone 18, what's up? Getting in front of a camera and talking about the shit that I've done wrong and talking about my life. It's not easy for me. But I want you guys to know that I really do mean what I say when there's always a home for you here at the Steel City Roundtable. Our social media will be on at the end. If you're struggling, if you're having a rough time, reach out to us. We don't promote any different centers or treatment plans, but what we can do is we can help you research shit. If you're like, hey, I'm going to be doing a couple episodes here where it talks about what's the rehab for dummies prep kit. What do I need to have? Stupid shit like that, you may not think about until you get to rehab, because I know I didn't. And when I got there, I didn't have shit. And I had a really big Amazon bill. But, I just wanted to reach out to you guys today and just tell you that, you know, a mental health diagnosis is not a death sentence, but untreated alcoholism, untreated addiction, and untreated mental health can be. So please, if you're struggling, if you're having a rough time, talk to somebody, please. Reach out. Just, get it off your chest. And then maybe you can think logically about what your next step is. But, my last piece of advice for today is that just because you change doesn't mean you get to forget. We always have to remember where we are and where we came from and how we got here, because if we don't, our life has the potential of returning back to where it was before. We only get better by remembering and doing better things. So I'm going to let you guys go with that. I love you all. And once again, there's always a seat here for you at the Steel City Roundtable. I hope to see you guys again soon. Love you all. Good night.